the kind of the head organization, which is called the Supreme Constellation of the Order of the Eastern Star, and with himself as the most enlightened grand luminary. And, you know, don't you just love these titles, you know, Supreme Exalted Poobah and most exalted, most enlightened grand luminary. And then he started issuing charters for various parts of the United States. However, in 1860, that concept was abandoned of the constellation, and charters were issued for the organization of families. Instead, they called them families instead of constellations. But in 1868, that was also abandoned. You'll find as we go through this, there's been a lot of tinkering with this organization over the years for reasons that I think will be obvious. In 1868, he got to know Robert McCoy, and I think most of you know who Robert McCoy was. If the name isn't familiar, perhaps McCoy Publishing is. And he's probably one of the foremost, if not the most foremost, publishers of Masonic materials. And Dr. Morris transferred all control of the Order of the Eastern Star to McCoy. And under McCoy, the Supreme Chapter was organized, Grand Chapter, excuse me. And then in 1867-68, McCoy published the first official Eastern Star ritual. Now today, local Eastern Star bodies are called chapters, as some of you probably know, and its supreme headquarters is located in Washington, D.C., and we wonder why they have all that trouble in that city. Now, we're going to look at, kind of like we did yesterday with Dame Malay, we're going to look at the star ritual and then give it a biblical critique. First of all, it has much in common with the Masonic Lodge. For example, they usually meet on Masonic lodges on off nights when the regular lodge bodies aren't meeting. The chapter room is laid out very similar to a lodge room, except in the middle of the room, serving as a giant altar, is a large layout of a five-pointed star, with 5 officers around it, 1 at each point. As usual, the ritual begins with processing in of the worthy matron and all the high officers. The chapter room is, the term they use is proved rather than purged, which means that everyone is determined to be valid Eastern Star members. Then the chapter officers each give a formal recitation of their duties and the nature of their officer badges. The 5 Star Point officers then introduce themselves and give a brief sermon on the lessons that their point is supposed to teach. Now, these 5 characters are Ada, Ruth, Esther, Martha, and Electa. And they're supposedly from the Bible, but don't feel bad if you've never heard of the first or the last one, because the one is Jephthah's daughter, and of course she is not actually named in the Bible. She's just called Jephthah's daughter. And then the last one is Electa, and that's taken from 2 John, where it talks about John writes a letter to the elect lady and her children. And so there was not anybody really named Electa. Now, we're going to go through these and examine these little homilies they give. Ada, Jephthah's daughter, states that her duty is to make known to all proper inquirers the light and knowledge and beauty of the blue ray, remember that, which represents the sky when all clouds have vanished and symbolizes fidelity. My badge is a sword and veil within the triangle, an emblem of the heroic conduct of Jephthah's daughter. Now, it's interesting because you'll find that they will talk about these colored rays. They'll talk about the blue ray and the yellow ray and the white ray and so on. That's real interesting if you have any background in the occult, because when I was involved in rather high-level Satanism, there was an organization that I belonged to briefly until I got thrown out because I wanted to stay with my wife. It was called the Monastery of the Seven Rays. And in the occult, there's these ideas that all the colors are representative rays of power that emerged from various occult centers around the world. And so it's intriguing that right off the bat we've got this use. The other thing that's even more interesting is that in witchcraft, when we were initiated into witchcraft, they talked about the 3 rays that came out of Atlantis: the blue ray, the red ray, and the white ray. And the blue ray was the wisdom ray, the white ray was the love ray, and the red ray was the power ray. Wisdom ray, the white ray was the love ray, and the red ray was the power ray. And so here we have those same 3 rays plus 2 others, and they're being talked about in the context of the Eastern Star. Now, this is the most unusual of the 5 star points, okay? And I have probably the most to say about Ada of any of them. She is based upon a character out of Judges 11. And the idea of it concerns with the making of a rash oath. What has happened here, and I'm going to read the passage. In Judges 11, verse 30, it says this: Jephthah vowed a vow unto the Lord, and said, If thou shalt without fail deliver the children of Ammon into my hands. Now you see, Jephthah was a judge in Israel. That needs to be kind of explained, because he's not a well-known character in the Old Testament. And he's fighting the children of Ammon. And so he says, If thou shalt without fail deliver the children of Ammon into my hands, then it shall be that whosoever cometh forth from the door of my house to meet me when I return in peace from the children of Ammon shall surely be the Lord's, and I will offer it up in a burnt offering. So he's saying, he's making a vow, that if he wins this battle, then the first thing that comes out of his doorway when he comes home victorious, he will offer it up to the Lord as a burnt offering. Now it happens that when the victory comes, the first being to come out of his doors to meet him is his daughter, dancing and rejoicing with a timbrel. Jephthah cries out, Alas, my daughter, that's in 11:35 of Judges, and that becomes the secret word of Ada. Now, some believe that that Jephthah ends up sacrificing his daughter in a human sacrifice according to the vow. There are some commentators, however, that look upon this verse. Judges 11:37. Ada is speaking here, and she says, Let this thing be done for me. Let me alone 2 months, that I may go up and down upon the mountains and bewail my virginity, I and my fellows. And he said, Go. And he sent her away for 2 months, and she went with her companions and bewailed her virginity upon the mountains. And it came to pass at the end of 2 months that she returned unto her father, who did with her according to his vow which he had vowed, and she knew no man. And it was a custom in Israel that the daughters of Israel went yearly to lament the daughter of Jephthah, the Gileadite, 4 days in a year. Now, a lot of Bible commentators will tell you that they don't believe that Jephthah actually murdered his daughter. They say that instead the daughter took a vow of perpetual virginity, which in those days would have been just about as bad as being killed, because it was very important then for a woman to have children, and especially consider that she was apparently Jephthah's only child. And so this would mean the end of the line, just as surely as if he had killed her, because he would have no offspring, or she would have no offspring that could carry on the name. Jephthah, as a Jew, would know that God does not accept unclean sacrifices. For example, if you were Jewish, you would never throw a pig on the altar and sacrifice it. And similarly, human sacrifice was forbidden by God. So therefore, it's highly unlikely that the daughter was killed. Instead, it was likely that she was dedicated to the Lord and had to live out her life childless, which would still be a considerable sacrifice. However, the bottom line is that the Bible passage is clearly a warning from God on the danger of rash vows. God does not and has not ever condoned human sacrifice. Jephthah put himself in a position of either sinning by breaking his vow or sinning by killing his little spiritual and even physical destruction to their own children. However, in typical Masonic fashion, they interpret this as that you must keep your vows no matter what the cost, even if they are stupid, unbiblical, or rash in nature. So that's the initial problem with Ruth. With Ada. Now the second character to come along is Ruth. Now there's not a lot that we can say about her compared to Ada. She says this, that her duty is to make known to all proper inquirers the light, knowledge, and beauty of the yellow ray, whose golden hue symbolizes constancy. My badge is the sheaf within the triangle, an emblem of plenty, which presents the reward of patient industry gained by the humble gleaner. Now, of course, Ruth was a gleaner, and that's where they draw this analogy. Now, there's not too much I can say here except for the fact that there's the idea of salvation by works rather than grace is certainly suggested. And also, I think there's some unintentional irony here, because one of the secondary themes in the book of Ruth is the idea of her needing the headship of Boaz. Boaz was her near kinsman, and she literally asked him to be her covering. And yet the passage here, they ignore that, and the problem is that when Masons join Masonry or get their female kinfolk into the Eastern Star or into Rainbow, they are placing them under satanic headship. So they're doing exactly the opposite of what Boaz did for Ruth. Okay, then we have Esther. Oh, there's not a whole lot I need to say about Esther. There's not actually anything really problematic there. She has the white ray, though, if you're taking notes on this. And her badge is the crown and scepter within a triangle because, of course, Esther was the queen of Babylon at one point during the Babylonian captivity. However, here's the deal with Martha. Her key word or secret word is, believest thou this? And, of course, this is the Martha from the Gospel of John. And it says here that her duty is to make known to all proper inquirers the light, knowledge, and beauty of the green ray, an emblem of nature's life and beauty, symbolizing hope and immortality. She says, my badge is the broken column within a triangle, an emblem of the death of a person cut off in the vigor of life, and it should remind us of the sisterly grief of Martha. Now, of course, Martha was the woman who, along with Mary, was the was the sister of Lazarus, the Lazarus who died, and then Jesus raised him up from the dead. This is in John 11. Why they do mention at great length, and this is the first time we're in the New Testament here, they do mention at great length the fact that Jesus says, you know, I am the resurrection and the life, and that's good. No problem with that. But there are some Masonic sour notes in it. For example, there's a lot of pagan symbolism going on here. The use of the color green. Now, I have nothing against green, but it is in paganism the symbol of new life and new vitality from the standpoint of the daily or the yearly cycle of the seasons. You know, in springtime, everything turns green. And this is very commonly used in pagan fertility cults. More disturbing is the image of the broken column and what that really means. Now, earlier on, I believe it was in Larry's talk, he had that picture up of the monument that was supposedly placed over Hiram's burial site, and it had a broken column with a young virgin weeping with Father Time standing behind her unplaiting her hair. Now, a broken column is a key Masonic symbol, and they give you, they say that it means the idea of a life cut off early or whatever, but actually if you read their writings, and I document this very thoroughly in my book, that broken column is a phallic symbol, and it symbolizes the lost member of Osiris.